I don't know, it was just rough. At some point, I just kind of looked at all my supplies and I was just thinking, like, it'd be fun to look back on, the before days as as like an escape. I just picked a month and I just started. And the first spread I think took forever because I was overthinking everything. But I don't know, it just felt like some kind of DIY therapy where it was like the world was a bit of chaotic, my family was hurting living in it, but scrapbooking, I could just kind of live in like those better times.
Welcome to Scrapbook Your Way, the show that explores the breadth of ways to be a memory keeper today. I'm your host, Jennifer Wilson, owner of Simple Scrapper and author of The New Rules of Scrapbooking. This is episode 188. In this episode, I'm joined by LeeAnne Jones to hear how she transitioned from being a Project Life kit collector to a passionate pocket page scrapbooker. Hey, LeeAnne, welcome to Scrapbook Your Way.
Hi, thanks for having me. I love this podcast.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you for joining me today. And before we get into our regular routine of topics, as well as our special topic for the day, would you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is LeeAnne Jones. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. And for any locals, I live in the East Bay. I am married to my husband, Paul, for more than 13 years. And we have two daughters, Denali, who is 8, and Paisley, who is 6. We also have 2 cats, Nom Nom and Pepper are their names. And outside of scrapbooking, I work part-time as a freelance writer and editor, mostly with lifestyle and travel magazines, but a few book titles as well. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Very cool. Thank you. So what's exciting you right now in memory keeping and scrapbooking?
Oh, I think the most exciting thing I'm seeing a lot lately, and it's not necessarily new, I guess, but maybe it's evolved a little, is just like these incorporation of artist techniques. Like there's always kind of been this mixed media thing, I guess, but I feel like I'm just seeing more. So for example, there's a scrapbooker, I believe her name is Jenny Simon, and she like incorporates her sketches and her paintings into her albums. She did like this insanely beautiful sketch of Betty White for a page, and then she hand painted her December Daily album with like some like Hebrew lettering, and it was just gorgeous. I'm trying to think of some other examples. Oh, recently, Linda Jordan, she did like doodles and stuff on top of her photos for A Week in the Life. I saw another one from Pink Fresh Studio. I believe her name is Annette, but she did this really cool hand painted background. I don't know. It just feels like this really interesting blending of these kind of art and craft techniques with the scrapbooking products that I think is really interesting. And I haven't really tried it myself, but I really want to.
Yes. I think backgrounds sometimes are the easiest, but it's just such a thing where you can kind of just play and also give yourself some room for experimentation to know you might totally make something crazy and not like it. And that's okay. That's part of the process.
Yeah. I'm not very good at convincing myself that feeling's okay, even though I know it's okay.
Alrighty. Well, I think that might come up later in our conversation related to Project Life. But before we get there, we always love to ask our guests, what is one story on your memory keeping bucket list? So this is something that feels really important to capture, but you've not done it yet.
So the list is really long. I am not the most productive scrapbooker, so I am very slow. I think in one of your earlier guests this month was talking about like intentional scrapbooker. I'm like, yes, that is me. But I think, I don't know, there's some big projects like documenting my second daughter's first year. Like I did that for my first daughter, but not my second. So that's a big one. And then also I want to do just more about my life growing up. I feel like I've done a lot of scrapping of my children. And one story that's kind of been rattling around in my head is like documenting stories about my name. And like, obviously a big part of that is where my name came from. So like, my name is LeeAnne Marie, and each of those pieces are my mom and her sister's middle names.
Oh,
so that's cool.
Yeah,
that's really cool. But then I've also had these like really random stories throughout my life about my name. Like when I used a nickname for a while, which was Annie, when I happened to be in a college class with two other women named LeeAnne, which was like insane because I've not met that many.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also a woman who I've never met, but several of my friends have met. And she keeps coming in and out of my life in strange ways. So I don't know. I just thought there's like all these stories about my name, and I'd like to kind of bring them all together somehow in a scrapbook page or maybe multiple pages.
Oh, that's so fun. What a great idea. I've not heard stories of that, but I'm kind of brainstorming now on all of the ones that I can think of related to my name. Sometimes I go by the nickname Fur, which there's a whole story behind that. And
Nice.
so yeah, I think I definitely have to do that too. So thank you for sharing the idea.
Oh yeah, no problem.
All right. So I invited you on the show because you've been sharing on Instagram about your process of catching up with past years of project life.
Mm-hmm.
And can you start by telling us a little bit about your history as a memory keeper? How did you get started and kind of how did you evolve?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I started as so many people did with creative memories. My aunt hosted a party and, a consultant came over and showed us how to make pages. I think I know I was a teenager and I was trying to think like at what point, but I think it was somewhere around the mid 90s. I loved it immediately. I felt like it combined like I love telling stories, I love photography, I love design, and then I'm also just kind of really sentimental. So it was a good combination. And I do remember back then, I kind of have this like rebellious thing where I kind of like to do things differently. But I remember back then, you had to trim like the 12 by 12 fake paper to fit their like proprietary album pages. They were like a little bit shorter.
Yes.
And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I am not doing that. And so I was like, told the consultant, like, I'm getting my own stuff. And so I would get my own, protectors and albums at Michael's or something and did my own thing. But I definitely did that like creative memories style shapes of photos and that kind of thing for many years. What's kind of cool about that, actually, I want to mention is like my family. So after that point, they started gathering to do scrapbook pages together, craft nights, craft weekends. And since then, since the mid 90s, some people have stopped. They've moved on to other hobbies, lots of quilting and cross stitch is happening, but we still get together. Like me and my mom and my sisters get together once a week to craft, and it's just awesome.
That is
I
amazing.
love that,
yeah.
like, our hobbies can bring us together like that.
Yes. I hear that so often with groups of friends and family members. And I think particularly scrapbooking because it is so like personal and it's our lives done creatively. And it's often kind of even so much more than other crafts can bring you together. Maybe I'm just biased. So. So we're going to talk specifically about Project Life or pocket page scrapbooks. If you had to explain this format to a complete beginner, maybe even to yourself back in those original days, what would you say about it?
I think I always kind of start with like the physical aspect of it. Like I tell people it's kind of similar to like those old photo albums from like pre-1980s where there's slipped photos into the pockets, except these albums have different size pockets to not only hold photos, but your stories and ephemera. And then I'd probably share that it's very time bound. It's about documenting like everyday life chronologically over a year, and that there's some variation, and some people devote a page or a spread to a week or a month, and I do my monthly. I don't know if that would be sufficient, but that's probably how I'd start it.
Well, I think echoing back to old photo albums, I think is perfect. I recently found my grandpa had this photo album from a vacation, and it was basically like the those Project Life mini books where it was, 2 up 4x6 photos and then a spot on each side for journaling, and he'd filled it all out. He pulled a little card out and he'd filled it out and put it back in. And it was like, wow, that's so familiar yet not.
Right? It's wild.
Yeah, totally.
Things always coming back in a different way.
So specific to your Project Life journey, how did that evolve for you? Have you been doing it for a while? I'm curious how your creative world shifted from making layouts to doing pockets.
Yeah, so I did layouts for a long while. I kind of evolved, but layouts, 12 by 12 standard layouts were a thing for me for a very long time. I think I first saw Project Life while reading blogs. I was like super into blogs for a while there, like 2008, 2010-ish. And I had, the Google Reader RSS feed of like every person who blogs on the planet.
Oh, rest in peace, Google Reader.
My gosh, right?
I really stopped reading blogs after Google Reader disappeared. It was so sad.
That honestly might have helped like change the landscape there with that disappearing. It's just wild.
I think so, yeah. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no worries. So I think I saw, some chatter about, Becky Higgins' Project Life was a new thing, and it just seemed so different. And I think at that point it seemed to me like it might be easier or less time consuming. I actually don't think that's true, but at the time I thought that it just seemed more simple, I guess, than making looking at a 12 by 12 blank page and creating something. But the thing that made me buy my first kit is it was the Midnight kit from Liz Tamanaha, I believe. And I'm trying to think of when it came out. It had to have been like 2012, 2013. And I just thought it was so cool. Like it was just so graphic and trendy. And then I remember finding out about Studio Calico. And literally for many years, I like bought things because they looked cool, but I was completely stalled out on actually doing Project Life for a long time. And I was trying to think of when that was, and I think it was probably when I had my first child in 2014. I was like, I want to document, her first year and all these moments. And I just saw all those supplies, and I was like, let's do it. Like, let's just get in here. And what's funny is I just a few years later, after buying so many supplies, I kind of like, I didn't like the rounded corners anymore. And like, it's so funny how if you don't use things right away, it just kind of changes. But I think I ended up using like a totally new kit from like Simple Stories to do her documenting, and then I subscribed to Ali Edwards' Stories by the Month. But yeah, that's kind of when I started, was after the birth of my first kid in 2014. But to be honest, like once I had kids, it was very limited scrapbooking time. So it was like I did that baby album for her and didn't do a ton after that. I kind of just kept working on that over many years. And then fast forward to 2020, in the pandemic, that's when I like really, really got into Project Life.
I think your story is going to feel so familiar to many of our listeners, both in terms of buying product that you have really good intentions for, as well as having, the seasons of life really impact how much time, energy, and motivation you have for your hobby. Like sometimes we're just like all in, we're so excited, we're bursting with ideas and energy. And sometimes it's like, I can't muster the extra oomph to go into this room or to do anything else in the day. So I think that's very, very natural and normal.
Oh, good.
Okay, so we fast forward to 2020, and that's when you've really gotten into it. You've already mentioned a couple types of products, but what projects are you really relying on for your Project Life and your Pocket Pages these days?
So right now I'm doing mostly LE Studio, and that's because I'm on the creative team there. So doing, 3 or 4 projects a month with those products. And I love how they're simple and they're bright. And both those things to me are appealing. And I also like that they're very flat. I'm always trying to my goal is to get 2 years of Project Life into one album. And I know to some people that sounds like really wild, but to me, like, I just don't want that many albums in my home. So having those kind of lots of cardstock die cuts and things over, wood veneer and thick chipboard is very useful to me in that endeavor. I also love Ali Edwards. I have many Stories by the Month kits that I haven't used yet that I'll go back to and use someday. And then I always do Day in the Life, which I love. And that's always just a spread in my Project Life album. Yeah, I kind of buy from wherever when things catch my eye, get excited about them.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think you've You shared so many different tips there in terms of like keeping your individual cards thinner so that over time everything adds up to a thinner album. And really kind of, I don't know, I feel like you very much customized your hobby to what you need as you've evolved, particularly in this kind of new season for you where pockets are exciting and are, fun for you again. So
I hadn't thought about it that way.
have there been any challenges that you experienced with the format? And maybe this goes back to more of your false start, but even today, are there any things that kind of frustrate you or you beat your head against the wall about?
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier about like, I originally thought it would be simple.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just thought, I think when it started out, I mean, as you mentioned, your grandfather's album, it's like, I thought you just pop in 4x6 photos, and then you write the stories behind them on like the 4 3x4 cards and you're done. But I think for myself and for many of us, it's like we treat each pocket like it's its own page and it needs to be designed. And so it's like, there's 8 layouts on this one page and they all have to look good together.
Yeah.
It's a little bit, yeah, it's just a little bit more designy than I expected at the beginning. But I guess to overcome that, I just tend to lean into a very colorful color palette. So, all my random photos from a single month, they don't all go together. They're all different colors. So when I look at my supplies, I'm always reaching for like, the multi-striped journal tag, or just making sure there's lots of different colors that repeat throughout the page. And I feel like that brings it some balance.
No, that makes sense too. I think that's the coordination aspect, I think, is sometimes a stumbling point. Like, does this look good all together? I think the grid helps it kind of unify, but I think that can be something that definitely, I don't know, gives people pause and makes them, not feel finished if it doesn't feel totally balanced or the colors are in harmony. So
Yeah, I don't know. Something for me, I want that balance, and I know for other people, it's like not that big a deal. But
yeah. So it sounds like you recently completed an album that was for 2018 and 2019 together. Can you tell us a little bit more about that project?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, I basically like hoarded Project Life supplies until the pandemic, and it's really honestly true. I was definitely like a collector more than a scrapbooker. But the first year of the pandemic was like really hard for me and my kids, just the ages that they were. Our first school year cut short, play dates stopped, playgrounds closed. My kid did not do well with all the things on Zoom. She would just cry.
Mm.
So I don't know, it was just rough. And so at some point I just kind of looked at all my supplies and I was just thinking like, it'd be fun to look back on, the before days as as like
Yes,
an
yes.
escape. So I just picked a month and I just started. And the first spread I think took forever because I was overthinking everything. But I don't know, it just felt like some kind of DIY therapy where it was like the world was a bit of chaotic, my family was hurting living in it, but scrapbooking, I could just kind of live in like those better times. And yeah, it just really motivated me. I just thought it was just really, it felt good to do it. So I just like really went to town. Like I just went through 2018 and then went into 2019. And once I got going, it kind of reignited my interest in scrapbooking in general. So I kind of started doing other projects, day in the life. I did some more 12 by 12 spreads. And so my album process slowed down a little. I actually just finished the title pages for that album like a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it's done and it feels amazing. Like it's like the first full, Project Life album for me. And yeah, I'm just like stoked about it. It's my favorite thing. I'm like, this is the first thing I'm taking if we had to run out of our house.
That's super cool. I'm curious, are you planning on doing additional past years or are you planning on doing 2020 or even,
So
more recent years?
I made one spread from 2020 And it was like really hard. And it was like, some of those months are still kind of like an open wound for me. And I hate to sound like, I feel like I'm sounding dramatic, but I think for a lot of us, it was really hard to have all that stuff going on in the world. But anyway, so I haven't gone back to it. I'm not going to sweat it. Like it'll happen. So for now, I'm just moved on to 2021, which for me personally felt a little bit more normal, and it doesn't have kind of the same weight to me as 2020 did. So yeah, I'm keeping pace with 2021 right now, like a year behind. So I'm working on September 2021 right now in 2022. And that's feeling good. And I actually do want to go back to pre 2018. So starting this year, I was like, oh, I'll do one old, page and one new page every month, but I don't really have the bandwidth for that. So I'll have to have a different plan, but I'd love to go back and do some of those older years too. It would be really fun to have all that documented.
Oh, for sure. Now, I'm curious, when you sit down to tackle a month, how do you approach it?
So, I have kind of a pretty specific process, and it's a bit lengthy, and I probably should like tighten up here and there. But basically, I move all my photos off my phone regularly, like every few months, and onto my computer. So they're generally there waiting for me. So they're organized by month and then year into folders. And so I just start looking at all my photos, and I mean, there's many thousands for each month. So I will delete duplicates and weird stuff. It's amazing how many photos I take of things like on the shelf in a store.
Yes.
I like delete all those weird things. I rename the files in a way that makes sense to me. And I really delete about 2/3 of the photos each month. That's how much junk I have in my camera roll. But then I go through again once I've done that edit, and I kind of tag my absolute favorites. And then I just count how many favorites I have. So if I have 20 favorites, I'm like, oh, I could totally keep this to one spread. That's going to work. But if I have, 50, then we're going to maybe need 2 spreads or an insert or something. And then I just start printing and kind of laying it out on my desk in order of like my favorite photos first, and then making the harder choices about what to cut toward the end, And then in terms of like journaling and stuff for like these older years, I look back at my Google Calendar, because that's where everything is personally and for my family. So I just kind of see what we were up to. I look at my social media feeds for that month. What else? Oh, I have a Google Doc that I log kind of funny or sweet things my kids say. So I'll look there to see if there's anything worthwhile, putting in a quote somewhere in the page. Yeah, I feel like at least for 2018 and 2019, it was easy to kind of get my head back into the past and like feel like I could document it accurately without missing anything big. I don't know if that's going to be the case as I go further back, but so far it's been workable.
Yeah, it sounds like I love kind of this customizable approach where you're not rigid to, okay, it is, exactly this many spreads per month. You look and see, okay, what is the volume of stories that I have, the photos that I have, and how, what feels like the right amount for that.
Yeah, I'd like love to keep it all to one spread, because as you know, I'm like trying to fit in lots in one album, but some months they're just too full, and that's fine. Like do a couple spreads or do a 6x12 insert. I'm totally up for that.
So you said 20 photos would be like totally fine for one spread. So what does that mean about kind of the shapes and sizes of photos that you tend to use?
So I'd still have to cut a few at that point, but at least it's like, I know it's in the ballpark of one spread. But yeah, I like to mix it up. I always have a few 4x4s, and then always several 3x4s. And then often I do 2x2s often on top of a journal tag with like a pretty pattern on it. And then I like photo collages, especially for things where it's important to me, but it seems like it wouldn't be that important to other people looking through it. So one example is like, I love going to art exhibits. So I might do like a four photo collage on like a 4x4 print with like a little caption off to the side where it's like it just takes one pocket and it's not taking the place of things that are more important to my whole family. If that makes sense.
Oh, it totally does. I think sometimes our photo libraries are so kind of imbalanced. They don't really reflect what kind of the pie plate of our life looks like. It reflects what we take pictures of, and some things we don't take pictures at, but they take a lot of our time. And some things like that we really enjoy personally, we take lots of pictures of, like, I don't know, not necessarily dumb things, but, you know, more insignificant, more everyday things that are valuable to us. And yeah, that balance is always an interesting thing when we're trying to kind of document holistically, I guess.
Yeah, it's like I know that this album is ultimately told from my perspective. And I put on my title pages, I'm like, life in our family as told by LeeAnne Jones, because it feels like this is my perspective on our life, and it could be totally different from my husband's. At the same time, like, I do want to kind of include these more personal things that I enjoy because it's, you know, it's the creative project that I'm working on. So I'm always trying to strike this balance of like, it means a lot to me and it includes like a whole look at what I'm into, but it also is meaningful to everyone else in my family who wants to take a look at it. So it's this little dance.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I love about scrapbooking, particularly the emphasis on the, when we're talking about project life or memory planning or anything that's a little bit more in the, I don't know, smaller scale, both story-wise and physically wise, often allows us to bring in more of those personal stories, I think. So we've talked a little bit about kind of real-time documentation versus looking back. And I'm sure you've scrapbooked either on layouts or whatever, something that happened more recent at some point, or even, you know, what you're doing right now for 2022. How do you compare the way you tell stories, the type of stories you tell, the things that are important versus not important when it's very recent versus less recent?
You know, I am not sure that I've really scrapbooked like in real time ever. Like,
oh, okay.
I have to think about that. I'm like, I think it's almost always been at least a year behind. Like, even right now, I'm doing 2021 in 2022, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it'd be hard for me to compare, but I do like looking back. It feels like a little bit less, maybe less stressful. Like I know I'm already looking back, so I'm never behind. And then also it's like I like the perspective a little. It could be interesting to have, you know, that real time perspective, absolutely. And I don't have that really, but I do like looking back a year or more. It's like you have a bit fuller of a perspective where you can, I don't know, you can just describe things more completely, and I kind of like that. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's my next adventure is like more real time scrapbooking, more currently lists and stuff like this.
Well, and the flip side of that is you should do what works, and I think there's others that can learn from that and embrace that permission to not be behind by always being behind, like you just said. I've talked several times with folks about, okay, if we're always not finishing our December dailies, why don't we use the new products from this year to scrapbook last year's photos, because we already have them and we can just make it a project. It has boundaries, like here's the photos, here's the stuff, make a book, and always like be intentionally doing it 1 year behind. So I think there's something to be said for that as well.
I really like that idea. Honestly, like, so as we're talking now, all the December daily products are coming out and I love them so much. Like every year I watch all the things. I even do like the prep day with like no intention of doing the project. Like I'm just like, I love it.
It's fun.
Then, yeah. And I will buy a few things, you know, I'll buy, you know, individual things. I don't buy like the whole kit because I just know that I'm not going to do it. But I do have Christmas and December documenting in my life. And so the products are helpful to me. I just haven't done that time bound thing, but I like your idea of just making it like, we're going to look at last year.
Yeah. I think for those who maybe are continuously feeling stressed about it. I think there's something to that. And the fact that you've kind of shown that it's a sustainable approach. You haven't felt kind of pressured to switch back and forth. Like, oh, well, I'm just not doing the current stuff, so I have to do that. No, you feel solid in saying, okay, this is what I'm working on right now. And I want everyone to feel solid and secure and excited about what they're doing. All right. So do you have any advice for someone who maybe is in a similar boat and wants to either start or finish documenting a past year, and they're now, from our conversation, super attracted to Pocket Pages, a Project Life format, if they haven't been already?
Sure. I mean, that'd be awesome if we inspired somebody here. I would just say start. I mean, for so many years, I was watching instead of doing, I was like collecting instead of crafting. But then once I started, it just like lit a fire, And I feel like the starting place doesn't even matter. I say I started with 2018, but honestly, I started with September 2018, which is super random. It's felt like a month that was a good month, And so I went from September through December and then went back to January and made my way through the rest of the year. So I'd say just like picking a place and time that excites you, like an incredible week or an incredible month, just because it's fun to document, and then go from there in like whatever order you want. And eventually you'll fill an album, and then that'll motivate you to fill another. I think that would be my best advice.
Oh, no, I love that. I think that's really important. And particularly sometimes we all need a little permission to scrapbook out of order, however that looks for you, that you don't have to start with January. I know when I've done Project Life type albums, which there's only 1 year that I really did the whole year. I felt intimidated in January. Like that first opening page had to be beautiful. And then, the January cover page, oh my gosh, like it has to like be epic. But then by the time you get to the end of the year, you're just like scribbling all over the page and you want it to be done. So I think bouncing around can help you a little bit, I think, too, kind of take out some of the intimidation factor.
It's interesting you mentioned the title pages, because that was where I ended.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, I have no idea what I would put on a title page. It completely stumped me. So I just went past it. And I was just like, I'll figure this out later. And then I ended up, I can't remember where I saw it. I think on social media, I saw someone else's title page and it kind of gave me the idea, but I just ended up printing a photo of each of us and our family, like my favorite one from that year. I made them black and white because I just felt like I really wanted to be a little bit more creative with the title page, with like some bold prints and things with the, the pockets. And yeah, like it was like, wow, I don't know why that was so challenging, but I'm glad I didn't start there, because it would have just kept me stalling longer,
Yes. I think it's okay to like skip past the thing maybe you're feeling stuck on and just go back to it. That's a great tip too. Well, LeeAnne, this has been so fun. Thank you for joining me. Can you share where we can find you online? Anything that you might have new or coming up towards the end of this year?
Yeah. So the best place to find me is Instagram. About a year ago, I created a separate profile just for all scrapbooking all the time. So it's Scrappy Annie, and that's an IE on the end of both words. But yeah, in terms of what's coming up, I mean, I would love to film a really nice album flip through for YouTube of this one that I finished, and then future albums. So I'm currently in that like research phase. I need to get some equipment to like hold up my phone and stuff like that, and learn iMovie, no big deal. But whenever that does happen, I'll be sure to share that on Instagram too. So Instagram is where it's at.
Sounds awesome. Again, thanks so much for spending time with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.
And to all of our listeners, please remember that you have permission to scrapbook your way. Are you ready to start implementing the great ideas you hear on the podcast? The Simple Scrapper membership offers a welcoming space to connect with fellow memory keepers and find the creative accountability you've been craving. Visit simplescrapper.com/membership to learn more and join our community.